And one state has had a dividend in effect for almost 40 years. And what state is that?
Hi there, it is Daniel here in Alaska once again, and I am with Jeff Landfield, and he has a very unique job and connection with Alaska here, so he's going to tell you a little bit about it. So what do you do, Jeff?
I run a website called the Alaska Landmine, and it's basically Alaska political news and other news as well, but mostly political news. And we cover the Alaska legislature, the governor, things in the government, local politics too in Anchorage, but pretty heavy emphasis on what's going on in Juneau.
Okay, because Juneau is the capital of Alaska, and that's where they meet to make the big decisions.
Only capital you can't drive to.
Okay, you have to fly only, huh?
You can fly, or you can take you can drive to a place called Haines. You have to go through Canada.
Oh,
and
really?
Then you take a ferry, so you put your car in a boat. And right now, our ferry system, there's a big issue with the funding, and they might even go on strike. And
wow,
ferry system is very important to the folks in Southeast Alaska.
So right now, I came here at kind of a pivotal time, right? Because they're having some serious meetings about the dividend fund, right?
Right. Well, the permanent fund dividend, yeah. So that's a program that was started in the late 70s. I think the first dividend was in 1980 or 1981, and it was based off of the oil money we got. And instead of being able to spend it all, they wanted to dedicate a portion of that to go to this permanent fund, which after it got money in it, they started to pay out a permanent fund dividend. And the first one was $1,000 to every eligible Alaskan. Actually, at first it was based on your longevity, how long you've been in Alaska for. It was kind of based on that. But then there was a lawsuit about that, and they said, under the, I think it was the commerce, not the commerce, it was one of the clauses in the Constitution, you couldn't treat people differently. Okay. So they ended up, it's called the Zobel case, this guy Zobel, and I think his wife, and they sued over it and they won. So the original idea was to, if you're here longer, you get more, and if you're here shorter, you get less, but that was struck down by actually went to the U.S. Supreme Court.
Wow.
So since then, there's been a formula they've used to pay off a dividend each year based on like a 5-year running average of the fund performance.
Okay. And
that went on for many, many years, for, I don't know, about 35 years. And then in 2015, our former governor, in the midst of a large financial crisis, the price of oil went from over 100 down to below, 30. Most of our money came from the oil revenues, and they Governor Walker decided to veto part of the dividend, which it's like jokes for years. In the late 90s, there was a referendum on should we use part of the earnings of the fund for government when the price of oil was down again, and it was like, I think it was like 80% said no. And he did it, and it went all the way to there was a lawsuit, went all the way to the Alaska Supreme Court, whether he had the ability or the authority to do that, if it was an appropriation or if it was a transfer. The court ruled it was in fact an appropriation, subject to the legislature who appropriates the money, and he got a lot of flack from that. People were very upset, and ever since then, the following 2 years, the legislature appropriated an amount for the dividend that was smaller than what the formula would have been. And now the new governor ran on a platform of full dividend, plus not even the full dividend, but we're going to pay you back the previous dividends that you didn't get. And now here we are in the middle of a financial crisis and budget deficits, but at the same time they want to pay out big dividend, and that's kind of the crux of the fight.
Okay, so you've heard obviously about Andrew Yang because you follow politics, and you've heard his spiel about giving every American $1,000 a month.
Over 18, right?
Right. Over 18.
Yeah, I saw him on Bill Maher, and he was on the Joe Rogan podcast too.
Right. So, and he, of course, equates that to Alaska for the last 40 years giving an oil dividend to Alaskans, and he wants to do the same thing with a tech dividend or the tech check. So what are your thoughts on that proposal?
Well, I mean, it's a little different in one way because we have this fund that's been created from these revenues, and also the Permanent Fund Board Corporation, they manage it, and they've done very, very well. They've over the years, it's grown. It's gone up by, I think, an average, I'm not sure, it's more than 8% a year. Some years they've had really good years, and some years they've had not as good years, but the average has been very good. They've had a good performance. So the money from the dividend comes off of the earnings of that fund.
Right.
What Yang is proposing, from what I understand, is just giving this $1,000 a month to everybody, and I guess if you take it, you can't get other benefits. You can't get other, but that's still coming out of the taxes. It's still coming out of the tax revenue instead
it's
of
more taxes than it is a fund, and so but he's a little bit soft on the details. So I mean, he just says that he's going to have Amazon and pay for it basically, but he doesn't say how.
Well, I think he said that the automation and the changing all these technologies are creating a situation where people are going to lose their jobs. Truck drivers and retail folks, and in the next 30 or 40 years, you could have a huge number of people be out of work. And I think he's trying to say we need to find a way to transfer some of those benefits that people are getting through technology and through automation to the people who are losing their jobs and who aren't going to be able to do as well.
So do you think Alaskans would be more in favor of voting for a Yang presidency with that in mind, or because of their experience with their own?
Well, Alaska's always been a red state. I don't. Last time, I need to check, but the last time we voted for a Democrat in an election may have been, was it Johnson? It was a long time ago. I mean, Republicans win here. Trump won here. Romney won here. McCain. They always win here. So obviously we got Palin, right? We got Sarah Palin in 2008. But I don't know. I mean, it's interesting because Alaskans, you have very conservative people who are that identify as kind of conservative, right-wing, or on the right people who are very much in support of and against any kind of cut to the dividend. And other folks will argue that the dividend is just, some people will say it's a socialist program, payout, it's a government check. But the people here that are really supportive of it oftentimes are the people on the right. When you have a Democrat like Andrew Yang or somebody talk about a freedom dividend in the form of a check from the government based on taxes, I bet you a lot of those people would not be in favor of that, ironically. They are different things, what he's talking about with the permanent fund dividend. It's also a lot less. I mean, the dividend this year, if it were to be a full dividend, would be about $3,000, and that would be a high amount. I mean, there's been years where it's been less than $1,000.
Right.
So he's talking about $12,000 a year.
Right.
For hundreds of millions of people.
Which is more, and in conception, that would mean that Alaskans would get the $1,200 plus their dividend from Alaska too. Because
we'd still get our. And there's, like I said, there's big talk about how the dividend's going to look in the coming years, because after the Governor Walker, the former governor, vetoed part of it in 2015, the next 2 years the legislature had appropriated a smaller amount than the traditional formula. But every year now, it's like a big fight. And forever, for 30-some years, it was just automatic. The formula worked. They'd have an announcement. The governor would unveil it, and he'd open an envelope, and he'd show people the number. So
that seems more reasonable.
It was easier. It was a lot simpler. It was a lot more.
They need to go back to that. It's just about how to do it, right?
Well, the problem is they passed a bill a couple of years ago, a law that said we could use a portion of the earnings of the permanent fund, a 5.25% draw would be used from the fund earnings to use for government. Some of that would go for the dividend, some of that would go for the cost of government. Because for years we just relied on 85-90% oil revenue, so they wanted to diversify that a little bit by using part of the fund. If you go back to the original intent and the people who started the fund, the idea was to have turn a non-renewable resource, oil, into a renewable resources fund. So everybody agrees it was designed to, at some point, fund the state when oil ran out. Some people now would say, well, we have too much government spending and it's not time to use that money. But the legislature did pass a bill to use a portion of that fund for government and for dividend. But the traditional formula doesn't work. You'd have to draw more money than what they passed in the bill.
Okay.
So that's kind of the problem.
So they're working that out right now.
They are trying to work that out. It's a big mess. We have, up until today, the governor just changed it, but originally he had called the legislature to Wasilla, where Sarah Palin's from.
Right.
And it's never happened before. He's never called its session out of outside of Juneau, governor in the past. So there was a situation where the majority of the legislature and the leadership didn't want to go there. They wanted to go to Juneau, where the capital is. So you had a third of the legislature meeting in Wasilla, while the other 2/3 were meeting in Juneau.
That doesn't make sense.
It didn't make sense. It was very weird. It was a lot of protesters, and there was different kind of grandstanding. So he's just today announced that he's amended the call to go to Juneau, and now they have to work out the amount of the dividend. We have our capital budget's in jeopardy because they haven't funded it yet, and we have a big match of federal dollars. So we spend $1, we get 10 back from the feds for things like roads and airports. So if we don't pass the capital budget here in the next, I think it's a few weeks, and fund it, we're going to lose $1 billion of federal match.
Wow.
A lot going on here.
So
Nice day though, huh? How about the weather?
yeah, the weather's great. I'm happy to be here in Alaska and talk to the fantastic Alaskan people. So I guess the real question is if there's any way we can create a movement for Andrew Yang in Alaska, even though he's a Democrat.
I think it'd be tough. I mean, he might, the dividend thing might be catchier here in Alaska because, I've heard him talk about Alaska before, and it's come up and on Bill Maher, I think, and other places he's talked about it.
Yeah.
The issue with a guy like that here is, we're a red state. It's a conservative leaning state, and
Well, that's one of his pitches that.
however, Bernie Sanders did very well up here
Okay.
in the early on, when he was running against Hillary in 2016.
Oh, okay.
So
Well, one of his pitches is that if the permanent fund could be passed in a deeply conservative state, then and conservatives would like it, then he's going to have a much broader coalition of people because Republicans, Democrats, Independents, everyone can get behind a freedom dividend.
The challenge you might have here is the biggest supporters of the dividend here are the Republicans, or are the, well, I wouldn't say Republicans, but the kind of the people, the conservatives.
Right.
A lot of Democrats would probably say, well, I don't need a full dividend if we're going to lose healthcare money, if we're going to lose money for the university, if we're going to lose money for homelessness thing, all these different things that are happening. So they might be the ones who say, hey, look, use part of that for government.
So what I'm learning here is that maybe for the freedom dividend, you don't want to mix government services with the money that you're giving out to each individual. You want to give them separate.
So for a long time, it worked out where that wasn't the case. We had oil revenues, and there was recessions, and there was crashes, and things got tough. And there was discussions a few times of, are we going to have to use, but the price of oil always went up. So we got lucky. But now we're to the point now where the price of oil would have to go up so much to balance our budget that it's kind of inevitable. So yeah, when you start to mix when the question is dividend or government services, a dividend or university, dividend or healthcare, dividend or education, it makes the conversation a lot different than if it's like we can have all those things and a dividend.
So I feel like in Alaska, automation may not be as pronounced as it is in other parts of the country. I mean, automation took away 4 million jobs, in the middle of America, and we see Walmarts with checkouts all the time, and all kinds of, Amazon sucking up malls everywhere in America.
We just announced our Nordstrom's here, our big Nordstrom store, which has been here for a long, long time downtown. They're closing in September.
Okay, do you think automation
I'm sure a lot of,
Amazon?
Online, sure. I think that's a big part of it, and that sucks. I mean, I buy my suits there, and I like to go shop. I like to go shopping, and they're closing. I've been here 15 years, and I think it opened in like the 70s. I mean, it's been here a long time.
Right.
So we're probably not seeing the effects as much as the Rust Belt or big manufacturing hubs, but we're seeing it. I mean, we definitely are seeing it. Everybody's seeing it, I think.
Yeah. Well, so from Alaska, the permanent fund is popular here, and I think there probably is some consensus with giving a freedom dividend to all of America if we can find a way to make it fair and doesn't involve government services. So from Alaska, thank you, Jeff, for being with me today. It's been a great interview. And subscribe, share, donate to the channel, donate to Andrew Yang, and let's see what happens. Let's get him to presidency here in 2020. Take care. Bye.